But I want to welcome folks to the first in what's a series of webinars that are being presented by the one-year-old MTA Climate Action Task Force. Yay. Um, so these sessions are designed to cover a wide range of topics related to the intersection of labor and climate activism. They're intended to deepen our understanding of ways that the union can and its members can work with others to fight the worst impact of global warming. So tonight's discussion is going to focus on what we can do in contract negotiations, since bargaining is where we can use our power to convince or more likely pressure our employers to adopt policies that help fight global warming. Ideally, this work can also help us build alliances with students and parents and community groups. And so we're going to hear from three people tonight who have important experiences to share and hopefully inspire others. We'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. I'll introduce the panelists and then ask everybody else to share briefly your name, your local, any relevant experience in bargaining. So Lauren Bianchi, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is an organizer at the Chicago Teachers Union and a high school teacher on leave of absence. She has served as chair of CTU's Climate Justice Committee and was part of the union's bargaining team focused on winning healthy green schools in their 2024 contract. Alex Hershey is the chair of MTA's Climate Action Task Force and is a reading specialist in schools in Somerville, Massachusetts. And Courtney Derwinski is the bargaining campaign team manager at MTA and has been focused on bargaining for the common good and bargaining strategies. So we've come up with a few questions that we're going to start by having Lauren and Alex answer. And then we'll have time for some questions, and then we'll turn it over to Courtney, who's going to share things from MTA Central, as it were. So the first question, Alex, why don't we start with you, is what have you won in your contracts in Somerville that you'd like to share with folks?
Sure, thanks, Fred. So we have included some aspects of climate justice bargaining into each of our last two major contract cycles. So we finalized one contract in 2022 and then another in 2025. Through those two contract cycles, we won several things that I'll list for you. First, to deal with some of the localized air pollution issues, we got the city to agree to create anti-idling zones around all of our schools, and especially those that are, we have play areas, play structures right outside the school. So new anti-idling zone signs, ideally more enforcement would happen. It is now contractually or included in our contract outside of all of our school buildings. Secondly, we were able to negotiate for discounted public transportation passes. In practice, the city, initially when we proposed this, we asked for completely subsidized or free public transportation passes, and we compromised on a discount or participation in a discounted program. In practice, the city has provided us those public transportation passes as part of a pilot program for the last, they said it was a pilot program, it's been ongoing for the last 3 or 4 years. So we do get public transportation passes for all staff and all high school students. 3, we got the commitment from the district to apply for grant funding for EV buses. 4th, we got a commitment to maintain healthy and safe learning environments, accounting for inside temperature and air quality. And then fifth, along with or sort of complementing the city's already established climate targets, we've negotiated for biannual updates from the city on progress towards those targets for decarbonizing school buildings and installing solar. So what that looks like is every 6 months we get a report that comes through the school committee that says what they have done toward their own targets. And then the last is that within our contract, we've negotiated for the creation of a climate curriculum committee with the intent of creating a K-12 holistic learning experience that appropriately and age appropriately teaches about climate change and solutions to climate change.
Great. So that's a relatively small local. And now we'll turn over to Lauren for a really, really big union, Chicago.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, my name is Lauren Bianchi. I'm a former high school social studies teacher. About a year and a half ago, I came on staff at the Teachers Union as an organizer to specifically work around the issue of healthy green schools. I will say that so after 11 months of bargaining during last school year, we did ratify our 24 to 28 contract. This is the first contract that's ever had climate and healthy green schools language in it, so it was a very big deal. And we had to figure out how do we go from being a small group of teachers that care about these issues to reaching a wider number of our members. So I think I'll say more about that when we get to the next question. But just to kind of summarize some of what we won, we did create a new joint labor management climate justice committee between CTU and CPS. It meets quarterly, and that's a space where it allows us to collaborate on all of these issues. We also will be the district created a climate action plan a few years back, and then the staff member that wrote the plan left, and they essentially didn't do anything that was in the climate action plan. So we negotiated to collaborate with them on a new climate action plan. We won a monthly facilities report. Here in Chicago, our school buildings are on average over 80 years old. The state has not invested in modernizing our school buildings in decades. So just like repairs and crumbling state of school buildings is really a big concern. So that's something this fall members now can see what actually is being worked on, what's being delayed in their school building. So that's been huge. We also won language that establishes goals. Now, those goals need to have funding to back them up, but we did have language that establishes the goal of installing solar at 30 schools during the life of our contract, installing permeable surfaces to reduce community flooding, and then a really important issue has been we don't just want solar and electrification and these projects at schools unless students are going to have learning and job training opportunities tied to it. So CPS agreed to create 4 new clean energy or green jobs pathways by the end of our contract. So we're working also with our CTE committee and educators on how to do that. And then we really had we use the umbrella of healthy green schools. So it includes climate justice as well as environmental justice demands. So we also got a commitment to expand scratch cooking kitchens to more schools and improve school lunches, and removing toxins by doing things like installing more water filters in schools and addressing health hazards like that. So there's more to it, and I can drop some links in the chat too, but those are some of the highlights.
That's very exciting. That's great. So why don't you keep going, Lauren, and tell us, we hear a lot when people say, yeah, this all sounds great, but our members are just focused on wages and what goes on in the classroom. So how did this get to be enough of a priority in bargaining?
Yeah, so I think my personal story, I think and how I got involved in this work, I think is helpful. And so I'll say that so I taught for 6 years at a school, a neighborhood high school on Chicago's southeast side called George Washington High School. The community that I taught in is a legacy environmental justice community. It's one of the most polluted neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. And this is the part of Chicago on the border between Chicago and Indiana, where the steel mills and the steel industry that built downtown brought many generations of immigrants to Chicago to work to have those good union jobs. And then in the 70s, 80s and 90s, those jobs went away, but the pollution, heavy metals in the soil, and a lot of truck traffic, because this neighborhood continues to be like an industrial zone, even though there aren't the economic opportunities for residents that there used to be, right? They're kind of left with the toxic legacy of industry. So, like, as I learn more about my school community and talk to my students and their parents and community members, I learned that there was a history of residents fighting to have clean air, clean water, safe soil in the community. So that was kind of my introduction to that issue. There wound up also being so in 2020, during like the COVID lockdowns, community members in my like in the neighborhood where my school is located launched a campaign to stop the relocation of an industrial metal shredder from the north side, which is a whiter, wealthier neighborhood, to a working class majority Latino, Black and brown neighborhood in the southeast side. And so myself and my coworkers and parents and students got involved in fighting to stop that relocation. So there was like a local environmental justice fight. And the fact that this fight was, we were really highlighting, how would the relocation of this facility impact students? Like it would have been located near two public schools. So that really created like a local, like that's where kind of the discussion began. And for me and my coworkers, we started making connections between, the need not only to stop pollution and clean up the air and make sure our students have, environmentally safe communities to live in. We were also talking about, like, we have crumbling asbestos in our building. The students refuse to drink the water in the drinking fountains because it tastes bad. We're overcrowded. We don't have any athletic facilities. And so, like, it was an opportunity for us to connect with some of the environmental issues in our building to what was happening in the community. Um, Now there's a lot more to say, but that community fight to stop the metal shredder was actually successful. It took years of organizing. There was a 30-day hunger strike. The federal government intervened. So there's a lot more to say about that. But it basically gave like teachers and families in that community a platform to say, we stopped one polluter, but like we're not just fighting to stop more bad things coming in the community. We're fighting for repair and like for us, healthy green school buildings and a pathway for students to get union jobs as electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters in the green economy is how we're going to repair that harm from the legacy of environmental injustice and environmental racism. So that's kind of what was happening in the 2 to 3 years before we went into contract negotiations. So I'll say a little bit more about that, but I want to stop here.
No, that's a great, great story. Very instructive. Alex, how did this get to be a priority in Somerville?
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time trying to think about what this all grew out of. And I think it honestly starts a little bit at the top. 7 years ago in our district, we had a big changeover in leadership, and that really embraced a new style of organizing and union power building. So we embraced an open democratic process in bargaining, and our leadership really said, "Hey, we're going into a bargaining year. Can we imagine together like the ideal place to work and for students to learn? What would that look like?" And they really asked us to, like, let's not negotiate against ourselves. Let's name the things that we really want. And through a very open process, where we held meetings at every building, encouraged many people to give feedback. Environmental issues, climate issues bubbled up a bit. There was a working group that got together, brainstormed some further ideas. And then I would say we also simultaneously did some outreach to community groups, to look for common themes, to look for common priorities. And then I remember having a meeting in the main Somerville Public Library, this 2020, like fall 2021. I think people were still mostly wearing masks. And it felt like a secretive meeting, but it was in a very public space. We met with some youth climate activists from the high school, and said, "Hey, we've got some ideas here. What do you all think? Is this something that this aligns with the things that you're looking for from the city?" And that started sort of a process of collaboration that allowed us to do some things on the inside while also getting support from the outside, from community groups, from these youth. And so we developed a set of proposals. And then again, going back to the visionary leadership, when we put all of our ideas together on the table, we didn't, again, negotiate against ourselves. We said, here's our vision for all the things that we want. We've done that now 2 cycles in a row. It's we put an ambitious agenda forward of different priorities. And then we live in a place where, because we created a very open, not fully open, but a very pretty transparent bargaining process. City leaders on the other side have to answer to us very openly, to our large bargaining team and a lot of silent reps, why we can't have things that seem pretty reasonable, like healthy and green schools. So that's kind of a condensed version of the story, but that's how I think these things became priorities for us.
And in both these cases, it wasn't just the union, it was the union in collaboration with people in the community. So I think that's really important. So why don't we actually combine the next 2 questions so that we can move this along? And the questions are sort of, how has this impacted the union? How has organizing around these issues made a difference beyond this contract language? And
I feel great right now.
What?
I feel great right now.
Oh, good. Excellent.
I've been feeling great for the past
somebody's
in a few days.
Good to hear.
Yeah. And then what advice would you have for others and other locals who are trying to motivate their union to bargain around climate issues? How can people get started on this? And
Yeah, so I think there's some things that can probably apply to your local based on our experience in CTU. So yeah, I'm somebody that I cared about climate and environmental issues, but it wasn't necessarily my priority. It became my priority because those were priority issues in my school community. And so we do see this where members who work in school buildings that are in environmental justice communities or do have like long-standing facilities issues, kind of like are quicker to kind of see why we would fight for these types of things. I think the biggest, so my experience at my school and that community fight is what made me want to join my union's climate justice committee, which like the timing was really great because like either at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020 before the pandemic, a couple members had created that committee and they were really inspired by, the youth climate strike and Greta Thunberg, and like they just wanted to create like a green teacher committee. And so like when I decided like I wanted to like connect with other union members that were facing environmental issues in their school, there was a space for me to go. So like creating, if you don't have a climate or environmental justice committee, I think that's a really important starting place. And then like what we found in CTU was that the people who gravitate towards that committee are the people that are like the most passionate and just like personally committed environmentalists, which is great. But then we found that there was definitely a barrier between the types of people who really cared about climate, and that was their number one issue, with the average member for whom, special education, staffing, pay, healthcare, all of these things, it's not that our members don't care, it's just not a top 5 priority. Our schools have so many needs. And so for me, it's really about framing. So like most members don't see a leaky ceiling in their gym or a hot or cold classroom as an environmental issue. But we frame it that way. And so when I've had members push back and say like, well, why is this a priority? Like, we want to get this contract done. Like, why, like, shouldn't we like, shouldn't we give some of these things up? Like, are we really gonna like wait more? Like, are we gonna be out longer waiting to get this contract because we fought for green schools? But then when I break it down, like, I think people think that green schools is like only planting trees or recycling. And so then when we broke it down for people and we're like, we're fighting for healthy buildings, we're fighting for modernized buildings, job pathways for your kids. Like I'm a high school teacher. Most of our union members are elementary school teachers, and they want their children, they want their future students to have job prospects that motivate them to do well in high school and to graduate, right? So people who will push back because they're like, what is this kind of tree hugger green stuff? Like, shouldn't we like, that's not my number one priority. When we break it down, like, it's about framing things that people do care about as environmental and climate issues. So we had to move from, like I said, move from being a small group of committed environmentalists to reaching members in every school. And there were some challenges, right? But the contract campaign was our opportunity to actually engage with more people and make the case that this is a priority. And then the last thing I'll say, like, yeah, this was only made possible by the relationships that teachers at my school and other schools built with local Black and Brown-led environmental justice organizations, like the Southeast Environmental Task Force, like People for Community Recovery. And so at the same time as our contract campaign was going on, we also launched a Healthy Green Schools campaign that included those partner organizations. They built out green schools committees that included parents, teachers, sometimes students, and staff members of those environmental justice and community organizations. And so, like I had mentioned earlier, like we won a goal of solar installation at 30 schools that doesn't have a funding mandate behind it. So what the Healthy Green Schools campaign was able to do is we fought for a Board of Education resolution where the board would instruct the district to invest in a number of solar projects. That resolution passed unanimously. We brought members of the trades and students and parents to come speak at multiple board meetings to say we want this. We also now have like a hybrid elected school board. In the next cycle, it will be a fully elected school board. So in the past, before we had these, like our school board members now includes many parent activists. We have an environmental justice leader from the Southeast side is the vice president of the school board. So like the political moment was such that we were able to do that, right? And so now our contract, parts of our contract can actually be enforced because of that school board resolution. And then certainly like a former CTU member and former teacher, Brandon Johnson, was also elected mayor. And so we also wouldn't have been able to win everything that we won in our contract if we didn't have, the political power to do those things.
Wow. Alex, can you top that?
No, I so admire the work that CTU has done. Thanks for sharing all that, Lauren. It's really inspiring. I'll say just a couple pieces of advice. Number one is introducing bargaining, introducing climate provisions into bargaining might not be the first step that your union takes. So if you have a commitment to climate work, if you want to figure out how climate work, intersects with your work, working in a school or being in a union, maybe you investigate some other first steps. So it might be, and I would say as part of this, you've got to find some allies within your union, within your school. So maybe the first step is asking the union to host a meeting, or you being willing to host a meeting, advertise to the union, talking to, trying to get folks together who are interested in talking about how they teach climate change in their classrooms. There might be other first steps that you can take, but so think about what first steps in climate work your union might be willing or interested in taking that would be fairly low lifts and not require a big price tag. As I said, finding allies within the union, start talking to folks within your school building. Also think about allies outside the union. What are folks in the community pushing? If you don't live in the community, find out what are the priorities of folks living in the community. And then I think it's also important to talk to leadership and get a sense, either from the head of bargaining or your union leadership itself, what is their openness to thinking about bargaining in an expanded way, whether it's fully embracing open democratic bargaining, or just the idea of having other things on the table that are not simply wages and benefits. I think it would be good to get a sense of that, because it's it might be a project that takes a little bit of time to really get up and running.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. So just because time is marching on, I want to turn this over to Courtney, who works with a lot of the MTA staff and leaders who are involved in bargaining, and is really focused on bargaining for the common good. And she's going to tell us a little about what that is and how all of this fits.
Thanks, Ferd. So first of all, I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time to join us tonight. It's really inspiring to hear about the work you all have been doing. As Ferd mentioned, and actually I changed jobs just recently, but I was the manager of the bargaining campaign strategy team within MTA, and we do a lot of support for our locals related to bargaining. And, one thing we've been trying to do, we're seeing, a lot more locals doing it in recent years, is this idea, and I think Alex alluded to it a number of times, this idea of open and expanded bargaining. The idea of, we're always trying to bring more members into the process, whether it's, by having them join bargaining teams as silent representatives. We want a case legally that, allows us to have, it says essentially we get to set our own teams. So, expanding, having more members be there and witness, what's going on in bargaining. And it's also created opportunities for us to have even more community members engaged in what's happening at the bargaining table. So, so we've been trying to, as we look to, achieve the changes that we need and the power we need to build to achieve those changes, to ensure we have, great teaching conditions and learning conditions for our students. The more, voices that are involved in that process, the better, because, parents are impacted by decisions that happen, in the schools, community members are impacted. So we're really trying to continue that expansion. And one of the ways we do that is through, bargaining for the common good campaigns, which I think Alex and Lauren have done a much better job than I ever could through their lived experience describing what those are. But essentially, and we sometimes call bargaining for the common good a little bit of a misnomer, because it really is more of an organizing for the common good trajectory, where we're really, just trying to have conversations with our members more deeply about what are the issues that are of concern to them that might be outside of the traditional bread and butter issues that get bargained, as well as what are the issues that are important to community members. What do they want to see in their schools and for their children who are in our schools? And so, things like, and again, that expression of, educators' teaching conditions, our students' learning conditions really matters in these campaigns, because, we look at things like wraparound services that come into schools and support students so they, are well fed when they're there, or, even like, I'm sure you all have heard of examples like washing machines in schools. So students, who might not have access to that sort of thing, are able to have that in their buildings. So, so when we're thinking about bargaining for the common good, we're really thinking about all the ways, that through bargaining, we can improve the lives of our students, our educators' working conditions, as well as our communities. And obviously, climate change is a really, really important part of that. So, there's a lot of, I think what we've mostly seen around MTA is people putting forward different proposals that are important to these, different issues. And, one thing that we think it's, important for people to think about is when we're organizing around these issues, how are we being intentional about, getting both the input of our members as well as community folks who are either directly impacted, or maybe they have some expertise in some areas that we don't understand. If there's, a proposal around housing, who can help us understand, obviously that impacts our students and their families, but who can help us understand that in the community. And, under our law, we can, and we do, some locals do, invite community members to be a part of our bargaining team. The idea being that they can, inform some of these discussions that we're having. So if you're a local that's considering climate change, it would be appropriate for you to invite, someone who's familiar with climate and environmental issues, or healthy buildings and schools. Like mold in schools is a real problem. So inviting people into the space who can help, advise as part of your bargaining team, what actions should be taken at the local level. So, and what bargaining language could look like. One thing we do in the bargaining campaign strategy team is we help, it's one thing to have an idea of like, hey, I think we should do something about, this climate issue or mold in schools, but actually knowing like what language would help move that agenda and, you know, help achieve some of the changes people are trying to achieve is really important. So that is something that, you know, the bargaining campaign team helps with at MTA, is helping people take, you know, members and, you know, in partnership, you know, with, you know, members of the community, parents, take ideas that they might have around bargaining and make sure that, you know, they're put into language that can really help us achieve some change that we want to see. So that's a broad overview of bargaining for the common good. It's really thinking, you know, more expansively about bargaining. What are the topics we can bargain over? And also, who are the people that need to be in the room to help us achieve, you know, and not just in the room, but like, you know, in our organizing spaces to help us achieve the changes that we want to see at the table.